Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. The fallout from yesterday's alarming report on the troubles plaguing some Ontario long-term care facilities is expected to dominate much of the conversation today at the province's legislature and Ottawa's special COVID-19 committee meeting. The report, done by the Canadian Armed Forces after pitching in during the COVID-19 outbreaks, uncovered serious issues at 5 different facilities, including allegations of insect infestations, bleeding infections, and residents crying for help for hours. Both Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford decried the report's disturbing and horrific findings, with Premier Ford pledging to fix the long-term care system across the province. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will discuss the situation with all the premiers on a conference call tomorrow. Well, it is back to business today for members of Parliament in one form or another. Yesterday, the governing Liberals got the support they needed from the NDP and the Greens to continue with an updated hybrid version of the special COVID-19 committee that has been standing in for the Commons during the COVID-19 pandemic. The new committee will meet 4 times a week with a mix in-person and virtual attendance by participating MPs, and this will continue for the next 4 months. Meanwhile, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimates that the federal COVID-19 aid program that gives small businesses a break on their rent could cost taxpayers $520 million. But Yves Guiraud admits his report is based on assumptions about industry eligibility and how many landlords will use the program. Applications started flowing in on Monday for the program that offers forgivable loans to cover half monthly rents in April, May, and June, as long as landlords drop rents by at least 75% over the same period for eligible small businesses. Ottawa says it is continuing its round-the-clock efforts to stock up on personal protective equipment as the COVID-19 threat remains. Federal Procurement Minister Anita Anand noted that in terms of establishing a ceiling on the PPE needed in the coming months, analysis was still being conducted. An Ottawa-based firm has estimated demand for disposable masks alone will be upwards of $3.3 billion over the next year. Air Canada hopes to raise more than $1 billion in share and debt offerings to bolster its cash position amid the financial devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. The airline says it has launched a public offering for about $500 million worth of Class A and Class B voting shares. It has also started a private placement of unsecured convertible notes, which is a debt security that allows the owner to convert it into a share for a total of $400 million US. The BC Supreme Court is scheduled to release a key decision today in the American extradition case of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Justice Heather Holmes is releasing her ruling on the issue of so-called double criminality, with legal arguments centering on whether the allegations that Ms. Wanzhou is facing in the U.S. would be a crime in Canada. The decision could lead to her release, or it could start a new round of legal arguments, including whether her arrest at Vancouver's airport in December 2018 was unlawful. Firings came swiftly for 4 Minneapolis police officers after bystander video captured the death of a black man in custody. The video showed the man pleading that he could not breathe as a white officer knelt on his neck and kept his knee there for several minutes after the man stopped moving. George Floyd's death prompted protests, with thousands taking to the streets and police in riot gear eventually confronting them with tear gas and projectiles. The case drew immediate comparisons to that of Eric Garner, an unarmed black man who died in 2014 in New York after being placed in a police chokehold. A new poll is suggesting a lot of Americans are skeptical about getting a COVID-19 vaccine if and when one is developed. It finds that only about half of Americans say they would get a COVID-19 vaccine, which is surprisingly low considering the effort going into the global race for one. 70% of Americans who say they wouldn't get vaccinated are worried about safety, but scientists say safety is their top priority. The European Union is unveiling a massive coronavirus recovery plan to help its 27 member countries rebuild their economies. But they are deeply divided over whether strings should be attached to the funds. Earlier this month, France and Germany proposed a €500 billion fund focused on grants worth about $543 billion US. But a small group of countries are opposed to giving the money away without conditions, and they prefer loans to grants. Police in Hong Kong arrested nearly 300 of the thousands of protesters who demonstrated in the streets as politicians debated a bill that would criminalize abuse of the Chinese anthem. Police massed around the legislative building and raised flags, warning protesters to disperse. The bill comes years after spectators jeered the anthem during high-profile soccer matches in Hong Kong. Human Rights Watch is calling on the UN's top human rights body to launch an independent investigation into the Philippine government's deadly drug war. The advocacy group made the call alongside the launch of a report for the UN-backed Human Rights Council. The report highlights the distress and economic troubles faced by children whose family breadwinners were killed in President Rodrigo Duterte's drug war. President Duterte and police officials did not immediately comment on the report, but they've insisted in the past that suspects were gunned down after they fought back during arrests or raids. The Philippine government maintains that it has no policy condoning extrajudicial killings. The UN Labor Agency reports that more than 1 in every 6 young workers is out of a job due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is warning of the possible long-term fallout of the situation, saying that it could lead to a lockdown generation if steps aren't taken to ease the crisis. The International Labor Organization says workers under the age of 28 will ultimately suffer from an inability to get proper training or gain access to jobs, and that could extend well beyond the pandemic and last far into their working careers. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.